Hey everybody, it's Jay Privman along with Marty McGee. Marty is actually in Louisville because that's where he lives. I regretfully am in California. Both of us wish we were at Churchill Downs, but as we know, it's a different kind of year. And because of that, Marty, no Kentucky Derby on the first Saturday in May. Instead, it's the Arkansas Derby on the first Saturday in May, and not one but two divisions and 7 horses who are in our Derby Watch Top 20 are going to be competing. So first off, Marty, let's take a look at our Derby Watch Top 20. We made one tweak to it this week. Why don't you let everybody know what that was?
Well, the only tweak was on the very bottom, Jay. We have Shooter Shoot Out. He is missing one of the divisions of the Arkansas Derby with a fever. In is a horse we kind of handpicked, and that's Farmington Road, who ran well enough and ran on in the Oaklawn Stakes to merit consideration. He is one of the 20 horses in the Arkansas Derby upcoming on Saturday. Otherwise, it pretty much remains the same. Again, we're more than 4 months till the real Kentucky Derby on September the 5th. Tiz the Law remains the lukewarm favorite at 3-1, followed by the Baffert trio of Authentic and Nadal at 5-1 each, and Charlatan at 6-1. Of course, Nadal and Charlatan figure as the favorites in their respective divisions of the Arkansas Derby at Oaklawn Park on Saturday.
Well, let's take a look at the horses that are in those two divisions. We'll start with the first division. Charlatan will head up that field. He drew the rail. The only other horse in this field is in our Derby Watch Top 20 is Gouverneur Morris. But let's start with Charlatan. Marty, he makes his stakes debut off 2 wins out here in California. To me, this race did not come up nearly as strong as the second division, and it looks to me like the strategy here is go to the front and improve your position. What do you think of Charlatan?
Well, you and others have compared him very much to Justify in that Bob Baffert was on the fast track to try and make a May 2nd Derby. Of course, it's a whole different ballgame now. It looks like he will have this field at his mercy. He'll be odds on, at least in terms of the pace, Jay, because he's very quick, and as opposed to the second division of the Arkansas Derby, there doesn't seem to be a whole lot of speed signed on against him. I am interested in how Dior bounces back from his disappointing effort in one of the divisions of the Risen Star. Also, Gouverneur Morris, as we know, Todd Pletcher really seems like he's heating up with both him and Farmington Road and Dr. Post. And then Basin, one of the Steve Asmussen horses, it's going to be interesting to see how, if he can improve off his 2 rather mediocre performances since returning from the hopeful last Labor Day weekend.
So Charlatan, we saw him winning an allowance company there at Santa Anita. Let's take a look at Gouverneur Morris coming off a performance in the Florida Derby in his most recent start, Marty. Finished 4th that day. To me, he looks like a horse who hasn't quite improved as much from 2 to 3 as I would have liked to at this point if the Derby had been now. But since it's not, he's got more months to get better. Where are you at in terms of your opinion of Gouverneur Morris?
He does have some room to improve, Jay. He would have been one of the huge long shots if he had made the field for the Derby this week. But again, as you mentioned, he does have a chance to improve. He was just okay in that race. He couldn't get by Chivalry, who had done a lot of the dirty work up front. I just think the fact that Todd has him in this race and wants to go forward with him is a fairly encouraging sign. So if you're playing exactas in here and you're insisting on using Charlatan on top as a probable wire-to-wire winner, I think that Gouverneur Morris would have to be one of the considerations under.
So that's our look at the first division of the Arkansas Derby on Saturday. Let's now take a look at the second division, which certainly looks like the stronger of the two. And as you mentioned, Nadal is in that. But let's start with Storm the Court, who was last year's champion 2-year-old off of his Breeders' Cup win. He's had a couple of starts this year, most recently in the San Felipe, in which he finished 3rd. To me, Marty, he's getting a little bit better with every start, but I don't know that he's quite, as I was concerned about with Gouverneur Morris a moment ago, I don't know that he's made a big leap forward yet from 2 to 3. What do you think of Storm the Court?
Yeah, that, with benefit of hindsight, Jay, the juvenile is really not grading out to be a very good race. He did go wire to wire in that in the juvenile, and there's a ton of speed signed on against him here. I guess that he would have to use off the pace tactics, but you do have Nadal and Wells Bayou and King Guillermo and maybe even a couple of other strangers in here who will be going for the lead. So if he's going to do some damage in the second division of the Arkansas Derby, probably going to have to come from off of it.
One of the horses that you mentioned who looks like a pace setter in this race is King Guillermo. You were at the Tampa Bay Derby, which he won last time. I was a little bit skeptical of the race just because it was so freakish. It seemed to come out of nowhere. But I will say this. Mike Welsh, our colleague in Florida, has watched him train subsequently and said that he has turned in a series of really impressive works leading up to this race. So I have a higher opinion of him now than I did at first blush with the Tampa Bay Derby. That said, this is obviously a much tougher spot than the Tampa Bay Derby. Where are you at with King Guillermo?
Well, you have to. He was pretty much on the lead the whole way. It was him and another long shot who were out front in the Tampa Bay Derby and nobody else. Again, it looks like there's a whole lot of other speed signed on here, Jay, especially with Wells Bayou probably having his hand force going early from an outer post. And so, it's going to be up to Sammy Camacho, who is one of the leading riders at Tampa Bay Downs. What is he going to do vis-a-vis the opening half mile or so, and where is this colt going to be? So in any event, he's really a great story. The media this week in Louisville would have been all over Victor Martinez, the retired Major League Baseball star, and his connection as the owner to King Guillermo. So hopefully he will remain a story for the next 4 months, and he'll put in a pretty creditable effort in this race.
Well, the horse who should be favored in here, we think, is Nadal, who won the Rebel Stakes in his most recent start. I thought it was a really impressive performance, Marty, considering he had to do all the dirty work that day and he still held on and won. I would think that considering where he's drawn for this race, that there's a chance for him to maybe sit just off of another horse and not be forced to make the running early. And that'll be an interesting thing to see how he reacts to that and if he actually runs a better race. What do you think of Nadal?
Yeah, I mean, this is one of Bob's, the three best horses, obviously, with Charlatan and Authentic, and he's got Joel Rosario, one of his go-to guys to ride. And again, it's going to be really interesting. They've got 9 furlongs to go. I think the first 2 or 3 are really going to tell a tale with him and with King Guillermo, and again with Wells Bayou, most likely having to be sent by Giroux from the outside. So. As you said, he did do all the dirty work, even with the last horse, Succession, coming to him in the Rebels. So he's proven his grit, and he's a pretty nice horse. And I bet you that Bob wishes the Derby was this Saturday and not in 4 months.
I'm sure you're right about that. Lastly, of the Derby Watch horses that we have video of is our newcomer, and that's Farmington Road. He ran in the Oaklawn Stakes last time. At Oaklawn. That was the race that got flip-flopped with the Arkansas Derby. It was run 3 weeks ago. So he's coming back on short rest, but I don't think that's a big issue, Marty, because he's a horse who's kind of a one-run horse. It's not like he is on the engine the whole way here. I think he's got a little bit of improvement to do, but he's another one who seems like he's slowly getting better, and another one who's probably really going to benefit by the Derby being delayed for 4 months. I know that this is a horse you think is sneaky good. What do you elaborate on your thoughts on Farmington Road?
Yeah, I mean, we've already mentioned a number of times how much speed there is. If it's made to order for a come from behind her, it's a horse like him or Silver Prospector, who's run from off the pace pretty effectively in a couple of his races, at least in the Kentucky Jockey Club and in the Southwest. He's still winning a couple of clunkers otherwise. But, yeah, I mean, going the 9 furlongs and with all the pace in here, if he's going to show that he's worthy of continuing along the Derby trail, you would certainly have to think that this would be the kind of spot for him. Todd and Chad Brown, as soon as this whole COVID thing broke, I remember asking them and writing about, with your deep benches, do you think that perhaps this postponement would favor your horses? And they both said, well, there's a pretty good chance, given that they really didn't have much anyway. So now that's kind of coming to fruition for Todd with the horses I've mentioned. And I know that Chad Brown has a few that have kind of popped their heads up too. So we got such a unique and different type of scenario unfolding right before our eyes, Jay.
And we've also mentioned Wells Bayou, who's also on our Derby Watch Top 20. As Marty said, He's drawn wide in this race, and there's a lot of pace in here. Marty, to me, this race comes up completely different for him than the Louisiana Derby, where he was able to make the lead and set a fairly moderate fractions. It looks like he's not going to get anywhere close to that scenario. Do you think he can overcome it, or is it too tall a hurdle?
I would never underestimate Brad Cox, as good as he's been going the last couple of years, and you know the types of meets that he has at Oaklawn Park. But you know, going the mile and 3/16 in the Fairgrounds race, and Florent being able to slow him down almost immediately after popping to the lead, obviously was right to his benefit. So, like we've mentioned a couple of times, it's really going to be interesting in terms of what their strategy is from that outside box.
Well, that's the two divisions of the Arkansas Derby on Saturday at Oaklawn Park. Marty and I will be back next week to give you our opinions of those two races. We'll recap everything. And then after that, your guess is as good as ours as to where things go. We're 4 months away from the Kentucky Derby, and we're awaiting racing to come back online in New York, Kentucky, and California, and for some additional races on the road to the Derby to be added by Churchill Downs. We'll keep you up to speed as best we can, and we'll look forward to seeing you next week. For Marty McGee, I'm Jay Privman. Thanks for watching.